Hello and welcome to Sunday's edition of Cracking the Cryptic, and today we have a puzzle that is claimed to be approachable by the constructor Grockles, and this has a 100% approval rating on Logic Masters Germany, so it ought to be something of a work of art. Now I have to say that the word Grockles and the word approachable don't normally accompany one another in sentences. I have done Grockles puzzles before, and they have always been very, very challenging indeed. And I think, indeed, I might be wrong about this, but I think that Grockles is a rocket scientist in real life. I hope I'm not giving away anything there, but I think he is. So, yeah, you'll know from the length of the video whether this puzzle is indeed monstrous. The testers say not. I have no info from Mark, by the way, so, you know, this is not Mark misleading me, but it could be testers misleading me. The puzzle's called Red Rum, although I notice there's no space between the red and the rum, so I'm wondering if this is some sort of reference to it being the word murder backwards. I don't know. I have tried to spot a horse in the grid. I am notoriously bad at spotting pictures in grids, as you'll have seen from yesterday's video, where I managed to confuse Mickey Mouse with an alarm clock. Anyway, I'll read you the rules of this one in a second. On the subject of alarm clocks, set your alarm clock for 10 o'clock in the morning UK time tomorrow, when we will be releasing a new bonus video on the channel, the latest in our series of videos featuring some of the world's great setters as they explain how they perform the magic that they do on this channel. So I won't reveal the name of the setter, but tomorrow at 10 AM there is a new video with lots and lots of interesting stuff in it, so look forward to that. Other than that, oh yes, our Arrows app. Now this has been a long time in the making. We do know we've just been inundated actually, but we have nearly finished it. It's very exciting. The puzzles are almost all tested, hinted or created, and that means it will launch very soon. I will give you more information on that in due course, but I can tell you that over the last week I have been testing puzzles by Fistemafel and Codec, and the quality of the puzzles is beyond belief. Absolutely incredible. So the app is going to be, I think, very, very cool. Other than that, May's monthly reward puzzles over on Patreon. Of course, we have Matyas Martinka's Puzzle Hunt. Do have a go if you've not had a go at it. I cannot recommend this highly enough to you. The quality of those puzzles is staggering, and we've only had one correct solution in the last 12 hours. So congrats, Ryan Walker. You are the last man standing. So very well done. And with that, let's get on to Grockles' rules, and I shall read them to you. We have got normal Sudoku rules apply. Clues outside the grid give the sum of the digits along the indicated diagonals, and these digits may repeat subject to the rules of Sudoku. So that's telling us, for example, that those cells have to add up to 32, and it's fine to repeat a digit. So in fact, I'll try and avoid that line because that line means something else, but you could, for example, do that. What you can't do is that, because that breaks the normal rules of Sudoku. So don't do that, you won't get the right answer. Other than that, yeah, the grey lines. So digits along grey lines form palindromes, i.e. they must read the same in both directions. So all this means is that if we find out what that digit is, let's say that digit is a 1, then we would know immediately that that digit must be a 1 as well, because we've got to make sure this reads the same way backwards and forwards. So let's fill in some other digits, something like that. So now you can see if we read the line from this direction, it reads 17871. And if we were to read it from the other direction, 17871, it sounds the same. So it's a perfect palindrome, and that's what we have to do with the grey lines. Do have a go. I think it's approachable. The way to play is to click the link under the video as usual. Now I get to play. Let's get cracking. Let's get cracking. And where shall we start? We shall start. Well, my eyes are drawn to that 47 clue. I don't know whether that is restricted, but it seems very high for a 6-cell. It is very high for a 6-cell diagonal, actually. It's incredibly high. There are not many degrees of freedom on this line because, I mean, basic maths tells us that the average of these squares is very close to 8, but what you can't, of course, do is something like that. That will give you big problems with the rules of Sudoku again. So the maximum I could make those 3 squares is 7, 8 and 9, which add to 24, and that would still require those 3 squares to add up to 23, which is 689. So I have deduced something minor but interesting. There must be an 8 and a 9 in those 3 squares, and there must be an 8 and a 9 in those 3 squares. And one of these triples is 789 and the other one is 689. So those digits there are definitely restricted. Now, the 42, I don't think that's nearly as restricted. Yeah, in fact, you don't even have to have a 9 in either of those triples. You could do it with 678, 678. So perhaps we have to think about how maybe the 32 clue is limited now, because we can't use 9 and 8 in any of those 4 squares. And in one of these 2 sets of digits, you can't use a 7 either. So imagine that was 789. Those 2 squares would have a maximum value of 6 plus 5, which is 11. And then this would be 689. So these would have a maximum value of 7 and 5, which is 12. So the absolute maximum those blue squares can be is 11 plus 12 is 23. Ah, right. Okay, so this square must be a 9, because the maximum I can put into those 4 squares is cells summing to 23. 32 minus 23 is 9. This square is a 9. Those 2 squares are no longer 9. And oh, hang on, there's a repeated digit. Ah, so I know, yes, okay. So these must be 5, mustn't they? Because if we think about this domino, we know it's either 6, 5 or 7, 5. And this is either 6, 5 or 7, 5. Either way, there's definitely a 5 in this domino, there's definitely a 5 in this domino, and 5 must therefore be the repeated digit on the palindrome, because if we put anything else in, we'll end up with a big problem. So those 2 squares are 6 and 7, and they are different. That's what we've got to remember. They are different. So you can see we've now got 19 on the palindrome, plus 13 makes 32, and that maths makes sense. So, in fact, now I'm noticing we've got a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 quintuple here, and a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 quintuple there, which means that these squares have to be 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, and these are on palindromes. So that means those squares have to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. Which, what does that mean? That means that, yeah, I'm not sure that's actually quite as useful. See, the 42 is basically, it's pretty high, isn't it? It's averaging 7 along for each cell. 42 divided by 6, I think is 7 last time I checked. So the fact that we've got 1s, 2s, 3s and 4s being used up is not perhaps that interesting. Maybe the 17 diagonal, because we know these are on the palindrome, so those have to be the same. So if they were double 1, you'd have to put 7 and 8 into those squares, because these 2 would have to add up to 15 without using 9. If, on the other hand, let's say they were double 4, these would have to add up to 9, which is not perhaps as interesting. So, what am I missing now? I'm missing something, I fear. It's not this diagonal, is it? 39 in 9 cells is, no, that's averaging very close to 5. Well, it's averaging about 4.5, but that's therefore very middling. We don't like things that are average on Cracking the Cryptic. We only like things that are extraordinary. This diagonal has let us all down. It should hang its head in shame. Okay. So, what do I do now? I've got to find something to do. I've got to I feel it must be related to these. The fact that these cells got reflected into here. Oh, I see what I am so silly sometimes. Oh, good grief. Right. I think I see what the trick is in this puzzle. I don't know whether it's the trick. Can I just do some maths? I'm just going to do maths and check whether or not what I'm about to say is complete gibberish. This adds up to 96. This adds up to 78. And that is beautiful. Good grief. Right, okay. I have now figured out what's going on. And what I should do is indeed highlight these, because they are actually rather beautiful. Once you think about these squares, let's make those green. Now, here is a question, and it's a bit of a facetious question. I don't know the answer to the question. What do those green squares there add up to? I have not got a clue. What do these green squares add up to? I still don't have a clue. But what I do know is that whatever those add up to, those add up to as well, because this is a whole box of a Sudoku, so whatever I put in those three squares, I'm also putting in those three squares, so these squares must be the same as these in some order. That order may be completely different, but they must be the same digits. Same things here. Whatever goes in there must be mirrored there. Now, why does this matter? Well, it matters because look, now if we look at these three diagonals together, those three squares, we'll put them in blue, are there's one square from the 32 and one square from the 17 there, and these three squares must account for the difference between these three, whatever these add up to, and whatever these add up to. Because we know the greens are the same. They have to be the same because of the palindrome. So the greens cannot account for the difference. The only thing that can count for the difference is the blues. And what do you know? This is 96, this is 78, the difference is 18. How big can I make this? Well, if I go 7, 8, 9, that's 24. So I need a difference of 18. I've got to keep these down and be 1, 2, and 3. And that's the only way I can create enough wiggle room between these triples to create a difference of 18. That's beautiful. It's a beautiful idea. It's really, I don't know how easy that is to see. I felt like I should have seen it instantly with these palindromes, but I just didn't. But I have seen it now, and once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And now I've got a 7, 8 pair there, which means those two squares have got to be 1 to make the 17 diagonal work. Now I get a 1 here by Sudoku. Now look what happens to my palindromes, look. 1 comes out of all those squares, which means 1 comes out of all these squares. Which means what? Right, so now we have to write 1 into the grid there. Why do we know this is a 1? Well, look, I've got a 1, 2, 3, 4 quadruple here. And where does the 1 go in this quadruple? Well, it's in this domino. I don't know which one it's in, but it's definitely in that domino. But the symmetry in this puzzle is very profound, isn't it? Because if we look along here, in row 7, I have got another 1, 2, 3, 4 quadruple. And that means the 1 in this quadruple is in this domino. So we need a cell that is simultaneously in this domino and in that domino. And that's that square. That's the only option. So those squares, they're on the 23, which might be useful. Hang on a sec. Let me just think about the 1s for a second. 1 is in one of these two squares. And in... Yeah, this is weird. This is very, very weird. Because basically whenever you do anything this way, you need to be looking at it that way straight away. Because the symmetry is basically... it's like there's mirror symmetry around this diagonal. It's a bit like doing a puzzle based on girth symmetrical placement. If you've never seen a puzzle based on that, look in the back catalogue of Cracking the Cryptic. There is some crazy stuff. Yeah, okay. Look, you're lovely. Right, these are on the palindrome. So they're the same. So we can just do simple maths here. 21 minus 5 is 16. If those two squares have to be the same, that's a double 8. Which means 8 goes there by Sudoku. Which means that... Well, that's probably putting pressure on the 42 diagonal now, because that definitely can't be... Right, we definitely need 9s now, because we can't use 876, 876 anymore, because the 8s have gone. So maybe you need 2 9s on this diagonal. If there was no 9 in these 3 squares, it could be 765 as a maximum, which is 18, which would require this to be 24, which would have to be 789, which it can't be. So there is definitely a 9 in one of those 3 squares. Whoops, I can't click. Lost my army. And there must be a 9 in one of those 3 squares. Now, that's a lot of effort for something profoundly unhelpful. 8 must be in one of these 3 squares, I think, which means we should immediately look in this direction and deduce the same thing. 8 can't be there because of this one. And yes, I've already thought that means I'm going to have to check the other direction as well. So 8 can't be in this direction, and indeed it can't. It can't go there. Oh, that's lovely. Right, okay. So now... Yes. Now where does 8 go in column 1? Well, it's not in those 3 squares, and it can't be in those 3 squares. So it's in one of those 3 squares, and the only option is therefore that square. And is that going to work in this direction as well? Yes, it is. It's exactly the same, look. 8 can't go in these squares or these squares because of this 8 removing the 8 from this little cell. So 8's in one of those 3, and it must be here, I think. So suddenly 8's have become a bit more pliable. 10 diagonal, look at that. Once we got this 9, 7, 8 triple, this has to be 4 and 6. It can't be 9, 1, 8, 2 or 3, 7. Oh, I'm not sure that does anything. It means those 3 squares have got to be 2, 3 and 5. 5 is not actually looking at any of those 3 squares. I'm not sure. No. It looks like we should be... Yeah, it's like we're close to getting a triple in this column, but we don't actually have it. So what have I not looked at now? I know these have to be different. I must try and remember that. No, okay, I'm stuck. I'm stuck. What is it I'm meant to do now? Is it the... Maybe it's this diagonal again. I now know there's 9's in those 3 squares. So if this was 21, 21, this would have to be another 12 on top of the 9, which would have to be 9, 5, 7. So this would have to be 9, 5, 7, 9, 5, 7, which would put 1, 6 on this diagonal twice, which would work with the 15 clue. But interestingly, you wouldn't know which way round the doubled number was. That could be double 1 or double 6 if this is 9, 5, 7. If this is not 21, 21, then it would have to be 22, 20. Oh, 22, 20 would have to be 9, 7, 9. Not 979, 976. You can't do 979, however much you might like to. 976 in one of them, because you can't use the 8. The only way of getting to 22 is 976. 9, 7, 6, and then 20 in the other one, which would have to be, you couldn't use, which would have to be 9, 5, 6. Oh, that's really, that all seems possible. Maybe I'm missing a trick here. I think that's all possible. 15 diagonal. Again, I'm not, I suppose the fact is I can't put 2, 3 and 4 onto this diagonal anywhere. But I can put 1s on it. I could have 3 1s. I could have 3 1s and then 2 cells that sum to 12. And that could even be double 6 or 5, 7, or, oh, it couldn't be 3, 9 because we'd have used the 3s up. No, this is not. I think I will do this if I see nothing better in the next. I will give myself 2 minutes before I'm pencil marking all this in. Find something better, come on. We can put 2s and 3s in the bottom of this row. Look, there must be 2s and 3s here. Which is very close to being interesting. Is this interesting? 2s and 3s at the bottom of the grid. Again, if you knew this was a 2 or a 3, you'd have a 2, 3, 5 triple, but you don't know it is. It could be that the 2 and 3 are there, in which case you'd have a 2, 3, 4 triple, and that would be a 5, but you don't know which one of, you know one of them's true, but you don't know, or maybe they're both true, but you don't know. They can't both be true, actually. That's it. That's a little bit interesting. If this was a 2-3 pair, this would be a 5, and these two squares would also have to be 2 or 3. So actually, that square is a 2 or a 3, which is a weird deduction. Now that must mean we can do the same deduction over here, I think, and we can. So this is 2s and 3s. Does that mean that has to... Oh, good grief. Now, look, if that has to be a 2 or a 3, and I bet it does because the logic will be the same, then this 10 diagonal will suddenly be the kingpin. So let's just think, can you put a 2-3 pair in those squares? If you do, that becomes a 5, and those have to be a 2-3 pair, and that square could not be a 2 or a 3. So look, that has to be a 2 or a 3, and now what goes in here? You can't put 8 in here. So this must be 7, and this must be 3, I think. Which is looking interesting. That means that square's become a 6. Which means we know that square now has to be a 7 because we know they had to add up to 13. This 6 is giving us digits. Look, 4 and 6 go in. That's no longer the 6, 7. That's got to be a 9. So 9 comes out of these squares, 7 comes out of these squares. We've now got a 6, 8 pair, a 7, 8 pair. A 7 here means this is a 9. And we're about to cook with gas, I feel. Don't like to speak too soon, but it does suddenly feel like something's happened, doesn't it? Now, has it actually broken the puzzle open? And does this mean I can get that digit because of the symmetry? I don't think it does, because it was this diagonal that was so useful, wasn't it? 3. 3 is not here anymore. So that means on the palindrome, that square is not 3, I think. So now there's definitely a 3 in one of those two squares. Oh, look, as there's a 3 in one of those two squares, that sees that square. So that becomes a 2 and a 3. That becomes a 3. That becomes a 3 on the palindrome. This is just gorgeous. Now this square is a 2. So that's weird. It's weird, but basically this one eventually, once you work your way around all the palindromes, gives you this one. So now what's going on? This is one of those puzzles that makes me think I'm in the presence of genius, because I don't quite understand the magic that's going on in front of me. But it's very cool. That can't be a 2. What does that mean? That means... don't know. I sort of feel like I might be able... Look, I can. I've got a 2 here, so that's a 2. So this becomes 3, 4. We can use the palindrome up there. That's a 3, 4. That's no longer a 3. So now I've got 3s in one of those squares, 2s in one of these squares. And what next? I've got loads of stuff in row 2. I just need 4s and 9s into those. 4s and 9s, that's a 4, that's a 9. That's no longer a 9. Okay. Now, what do I do next? So this row was very helpful. So let's look at its equivalent, which is column 2. So we can see we need 6s, 7s, 8s and 9s. I can't put 8s into there, so one of these two is an 8. I don't see how to resolve that though. That doesn't seem, this domino doesn't seem as restricted as that domino, for reasons that I don't understand really, but okay. Right, so what do we do next? Have we learnt enough about the puzzle to understand what's going on? I don't know is the short answer to that. I sort of feel like that square's got to be a 2 or a 5 now, just looking at row 1. 1 is a little bit restricted. And the other thing I'm conscious of is that I don't know what this has done for me in terms of these diagonals, if anything. I think I am going to have to look at the 15, aren't I? Let's have a look at this. So what do we know? We know that this square, we know these have to add up to 14. We know these two squares cannot be 2. Well, they could be 1. That's the problem. They could be 1. And if they're not 1, the next option would be 5s, because you can't put 2, 3 and 4 in. So if you put 5s in there, does the puzzle break? Yes, actually it does immediately, doesn't it? If that's double 5, these two squares would have to add up to 4. And there is no way of doing that without using a 2, 3 and a 4. So in fact 5 doesn't work. So does 6 work? Oh, Bobbin, 6 does work with double 1, does it? Does 6 work with double 1, or have I just done the maths wrong? No, it does. Bother. Right, so if this is double 6, that is double 1. If this is double 1, those two squares have to add up to 12. But they couldn't be double 6. And they couldn't be 4, 8. And they couldn't be 3, 9. So they would have to be 5, 7. And that would have to be very specific, look, because of this 7 here. So this would have to be 7, that would have to be 5. And there's always a 1 in one of those two squares, and there's always a 1 in one of those two squares, but we don't know the order. Oh, no, we don't. We really don't. Golly, okay. Oh, and I think this is telling us something we sort of already knew from this diagonal, which is this could be 2 sets of digits adding to 21, or it could be a 22 and a 20. So maybe I've got to do something. Actually, maybe I can do something with ones in the middle box, you know, because we've got these two ones pinching this L pentomino. So the 1 is in one of those squares. But look, if this is double 1, those squares get removed from being a 1. You'd have to put a 1 there. If that is double 1, you have to put a 1 here. So the 1 in box 5 is in one of these two squares. And twos, maybe. I'm looking at these 2s now. There's something similar going on with 2s. So if 2, hang on a sec, if 2s are in that, are not in, no, 2s are not in that L, it's not even an L pentomino, it's a V pentomino. If T's are not in that V pentomino, 2s are on those two squares. Does this just continue then? Let's have a look at 3s. If 3s aren't in that V pentomino, yeah, 3s are in one of those squares. Now, what do we do? Can we do... If that's a 4, and that's a 4, 4 has to go here. This is just incredible. This is just absolutely incredible. So you can see that the way these 1s, 2s, 3s and 4s interact on this middle box is really interesting. But the sort of coup de grace, if you like, the pièce de résistance is where does 4 go? Where does 4 go in this box? And I think you cannot put 4 anywhere but this diagonal. I might be wrong. But we know that the 4 has to either be in those two squares. Let's say it is. Let's say the 4 is in those two squares. Well, you can see then that those couldn't be 4s, and these two would become 4s as well. So you'd have to put a 4 here. One possibility is that this is a 4. Now, the only other possible positions for 4s in these dominoes is that those two have become 4s. Now, if these two have become 4s, look what happens. That V pentomino ceases to be 4, and you get exactly the same thing that we had with the 3s. The 4 has to be in one of those two squares, depending on which one of these are 4s. So the 4, so in fact, what we can say is that there is a 2, 3, 4 triple on this diagonal. And therefore, if there's a 2, 3, 4 triple on this diagonal, and there is, where does the 1 go? Well, it doesn't go there. So this must be a 1. And that 1 is sick. It's absolutely sick, because now those two squares have to be 6s. And once they become 6s, they become 1s. And that becomes a 1. And that becomes a 1, because we can use our symmetry. Let me get rid of the corner pencil marks there. 3, 3, 2, 2. Now, does that break the puzzle open? That's not a 2, look, because it's got a 2 looking at it. That's not a 3, it's got a 3 looking at it. 2, 4 pair in this row. So now in this row, we need 5s and 7s, which is, no, that's no good. We need 5s and 7s in that row. Let's look at this column then. We must have something similar going on. We need 5s and 7s again. That's, this time it's better. There's a 7 here. So that's a 5. This is a 7. That's a 7 by Sudoku. That's a 5. Oh, I see. And now that's become a 7-9 pair, and it's resolved by this. So that's 7, that's 9. Now those 3 squares add up to 21, so these have to be a 5-9 pair, and it's resolved. 5s and 9s go into the grid. 9 goes here by the power of Sudoku. We need 6s and 8s into those squares, I think. Which is lovely because that's fixing that square. So that's 7, that's 8, that's 8, that's... I don't believe it. 8, 6, it's all resolving itself. What magic is this? It's just mental. That's a naked single 9, isn't it? It sees 5, 6 in the column. Those 2 squares are 5s and 6s. What? Okay. So what now? What have we not done? We suddenly feel like we've really broke. That's a 4 naked single. It can't be 7 or 9. This square's a 7. That must be a 9. 3s, 5s, and 6s. So that's a 3 or a 5, I think. This must be 3, 5, or 6. And this column looks quite ready to break, doesn't it? Let's have a look. Yes, it is. That's a 6. That's a 7. So this is a 2 or a 5 to complete this box. That fixes that as a 6. That as a 5. That, oh, lovely. That as a 3. That as a 6. That as a 3. Deadly pattern. Oh, deadly pattern that will be fixed by this diagonal. This funny diagonal that let itself down at the start of the puzzle. It's going to come back with a plum, I think. Let's see if we can do these squares, though. Yeah, we can. That's a 4. That's a 5. So we're left with a sort of melee of, or a menagerie of 2s, 3s, and 4s in the middle. And 2, 5 here, 2, 5 here. And I think this diagonal will help us to disambiguate it. So at the moment, we've got 16, 17, 18... 30, so we need 9 more. We need 9 more from those 2 squares. Well, the only way that's working is if this one is a 4 and that one is a 5. Now this 5 disambiguates the 2, 5 deadly pattern, and this 4's got work to do and does the work because it resolves both sides of these. It's just ridiculous. It's ridiculously clever, this. So this became a triple 3, 3, 3. That's going to have to be a 2 now. So that becomes a 2, 2, 2. And those should be double 4. And we click tick. And that is a brilliant puzzle. My goodness me. I really hope you had a go at it. That is quite stunning from Grockles. 100% rating. I would rate it 100% too. I'm going to go away and think about it because there is some magic going on here. There really is. I love the break-in. That was very simple. But it almost gets more and more elegant after that with the way the symmetry keeps helping us. And this stuff you can do with the palindromes and the 2, 3s and 4s on them to look at. I mean, that is the strangest 2, 3, 4 triple. I mean, it really was weird. And the way that the 1s then got disambiguated and this one fixed the 15. Was it the 15 little killer? I think it was. Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. Let me know how you got on. I do enjoy reading the comments, especially when they're kind. And we'll be back later with another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.